But we begin tonight with the reason we won't get health reform if we don't get health reform. The reason we won't get the public option if we don't get the public option.
If the current proposal remains as it is, unamended, before the final vote on the floor, that I will not vote for closure, because I don't support a government-operated health insurance company that'll end up costing the taxpayers a lot of money.
Would you filibuster it? Would you actually stand on the floor and read from the phone?
I'm sure I won't be alone, but I'd be prepared to. But
I'd be prepared to. Senator Joseph Isidore Lieberman of Connecticut has thrown himself on the tracks. He has magically transformed himself into a wrench and stuck himself into the works. Senator Lieberman has decided to make history by filibustering health reform against his own party. Mr. Lieberman's decision to buck his own party here, to not even allow them a vote on health reform, he says is predicated on his hard and fast opposition to the public option, which, as you know, would give people a choice of going with a private health insurance company or going with a government-run plan. The problem is that in trying to explain why he's trying to stop health reform, Mr. Lieberman appears to have drifted into, I really don't understand the public option territory.
this is a new entitlement program, and the taxpayers and the premium payers are going to end up paying for it, or else the debt's going to go higher, and that's just the wrong thing to do now.
In the world sometimes described as the reality-based community, the Congressional Budget Office has in fact concluded that the public option is expected to slash the federal deficit. It's paid for by premiums of those who choose to enroll, not by taxpayer dollars. And, by the way, it's not an entitlement. Still, though, on the basis of his demonstrably and obviously untrue arguments about the public option, Senator Lieberman says he's willing to filibuster his own party with Republicans in order to stop even a vote on health reform. If you Google Joe Lieberman and filibuster, you will find that Mr. Lieberman has taken quite an interesting journey on the issue in recent years. As we reported last night, and as Sam Stein of Huffington Post has also reported, Mr. Lieberman has a long history of being against the filibuster. On big bills about the border and bankruptcy and even the Iraq War, Mr. Lieberman has a history of voting against the filibuster, voting to allow a majority vote, even on measures that he doesn't ultimately agree with. Beyond that, in 2005, Joe Lieberman joined what was called the Gang of 14. The Gang of 14 was an effort to stop Democrats from filibustering George W. Bush's judicial nominees. Mr. Lieberman and the rest of the gang physically signed a pledge that they would only use the filibuster in, quote, extraordinary circumstances. That was Joe Lieberman then, in a pledge that the filibuster should only be used in order to help George W. Bush get his nominees through. This is Joe Lieberman now.
Cloture so the rest of your colleagues could then vote for it?
Well, because that is not using the rights that I have as a senator under the rules of the Senate to stop something from happening that I think will be bad.
Of course I'd filibuster. Why wouldn't I? I have the power to. Yeah, Mr. Lieberman is on the record as being the anti-filibuster guy, even on bills he cares about, and in general as part of the Gang of 14. He was against it. Now, not so much. Here's maybe a window into understanding why. Here's Joe Lieberman talking with Fox News' Glenn Beck on Election Day.
Do you agree that Senator Hatch said to me that if we don't at least have the firewall of the filibuster in the Senate, that in many ways America will not survive?
Well, I hope it's not like that, but I
fear Democrats getting 60 seats, said Joe Lieberman. I fear you're right, Glenn Beck, that America will not survive Democrats having the 60-seat majority that Americans just voted for them to have. Well, now that Democrats do have 60 seats, including him, Joe Lieberman is doing what he can to, presumably in his own mind, save America from his own party by blocking the Democratic agenda from within, working against the Democrats while still caucusing with the Democrats. Understanding the mind and motivations of anyone, Joe Lieberman in particular, it's a dark and winding path. But it's not just Joe Lieberman who has to answer here. Late last year, President Obama intervened personally to make sure that Senator Lieberman would keep all his Democratic Party perks, even after the last election, in which Senator Lieberman not only campaigned against Obama and for McCain, he also campaigned for down-ticket Republicans in the House and the Senate. When, despite Lieberman's best efforts, the Democrats still won a majority in the Senate, President-elect Obama argued for Lieberman to get one of those chairmanships, even though Senator Lieberman had worked against the Democrats. He still has that powerful Homeland Security Committee chairmanship as a gift from the Democratic Party, which really did not have to give it to him, and which he has repaid for their inexplicable generosity toward him by promising to blow up health reform. Why? Why are they allowing him to keep that chairmanship? And what are they getting for it? Joining us now is Glenn Greenwald. He writes for Salon.com. Mr. Greenwald, thanks for coming in tonight.
My pleasure, Rachel.
Senator Lieberman has made it very clear that he plans to oppose health reform that includes a public option. He'll filibuster it, in fact, which would be historic. What do you think is motivating him?
Well, I think you have to look, first of all, at a Research 2000 Daily Kos poll that was taken last month that shows that a margin of 68 to 21% of Connecticut voters, the people whom he's ostensibly representing, favor a public option. That's a 47-point margin, which is almost impossible to find on almost any other issue. So when you ask why he's doing this, it's clearly not because the people that he's supposed to be representing favor it. I think clearly what it's about is primarily the fact that the industry that he's serving by doing this, by preventing competition with the public option, is an industry from which he receives very substantial benefits. He's drowning in campaign contributions from the insurance industry, the healthcare industry, the pharmaceutical industry, more than $2.5 million. In early 2005, his wife was hired by a large PR firm, Hill & Knowlton, in the pharmaceutical division, which at the time was representing the healthcare giant Glaxo in major legislation before the Senate. And several months later, Joe Lieberman was on the floor of the Senate offering legislation that would directly steer huge amounts of incentives to that company in order to develop vaccines. And so I think what you're seeing here is the kind of legalized corruption, legalized bribery that runs the United States Senate, only in this case it's particularly sleazy and transparent because Lieberman is ready to gut the major initiative of the Democratic Party.
And doing so using a procedural tactic that he's in part made his name by opposing, which is the thing that's so dramatic. Senator Lieberman, of course, he made his big announcement yesterday. Today, Democratic Senator Evan Bayh of Indiana followed suit, saying that he reserves the right not only to filibuster the final vote, but even to filibuster earlier than that, any debate on a bill that he's not happy with. Senator Bayh, we had thought that other conservative Democrats might follow Lieberman's lead here. He sort of threw the door open, and now presumably Bayh and maybe even others will follow. Can you say anything about what may be motivating Bayh?
Well, let's look at Senator Bayh. His wife sits on the board of directors of WellPoint, one of the largest health insurance companies in the nation. They own, by their own disclosures, between $500,000 and $1 million just of WellPoint stock alone. And as I think you reported yesterday, when Senator Lieberman threatened to filibuster the public option, as one would expect, the value of the stock of the healthcare industry, of the healthcare company, skyrocketed, which directly benefited, personally benefited the finances of the Bayh family. Let me just quickly reference this column from 2 weeks ago by Dan Carpenter, a columnist for the Indianapolis Sun who knows Senator Bayh the best. He talked about how his wife is benefiting directly from the very action Senator Bayh is taking in the Senate to block health care reform, financially benefiting his family. And he wrote, quote, "After it became clear he was going to be a senator, Susan Bayh started stacking up memberships on the board of healthcare corporations. Susan Bayh got paid a little over $2 million for her service between 2006 and 2008. Her husband had a good 2008 also, collecting more than $500,000 in campaign donations from the healthcare industry." And now these very same people who receive enormous amounts of benefits, in Lieberman's case from contributions and through his wife, and also in Bayh's case, are now ignoring their constituents in the interest of the country to serve the very industries that enrich them. It's really clear corruption.
On the issue of Lieberman's role in the Republican Party, given Lieberman's break with Democrats on their biggest domestic policy item and his break with them on so many other issues, what do you think is in it for Democrats to let him to remain chairman of Homeland Security?
Well, when the controversy arose last year about whether or not Lieberman should be able to keep his Senate chair, numerous Democrats, including Evan Bayh, who I think told you this actually, vowed and implied that there was an agreement that Senator Lieberman would not impede Democratic legislation by, for example, joining with Republicans to filibuster. In Arlen Specter's case, for example, in 2004, Arlen Specter was poised to become the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee and threatened to block President Bush's nominees to the Supreme Court if he thought they might overturn Roe versus Wade. The Republicans got together, the White House and the Congress, and told Specter that he will not be chairman of that committee unless he vows that he will allow those appointments to proceed. And the White House, in just this year alone, when it came time to threatening recalcitrant Democrats, who, for example, progressives were threatening to block the war supplemental bill that the president wanted to fund the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, according to Lynn Woolsey, who's the chair of the House Progressive Caucus, in the House, the White House is calling Democratic freshmen and threatening them that unless they voted for the war supplemental bill that the president wanted, they would never hear from the White House again.